In today's video, we're going to be looking at a question which some of you might be wondering, and I've seen asked on multiple places such as Reddit and across YouTube. That being, why exactly did Michael Gray betray Tommy Shelby, and how exactly he betrayed him? To first understand Michael and his motivations, we must first start in Season 2, where Michael is first introduced. Tommy actually goes looking for Michael after Polly goes to a seance reading and discovers that she has both a daughter and a son. Unfortunately, the daughter, however, had passed away, and the son was still alive. Tommy went and tracked him down and found him at a little village outside of England. A little village just on the outskirts of England where Michael was living with an orphan family after being taken from the church. He is introduced quite briefly, with Tommy explaining who his mother is and where he can find her. At the end of this same episode, we see Michael actually rock up to Watery Lane and knock on the door where Polly lives, where the Peaky Blinders more or less live. From there, Michael is slowly introduced to his family and shares a really great introductory scene with Arthur, John and Tommy where they are playing they're play shooting each other, and they run in where Michael is talking to Polly, and they have a great exchange where John explains how he used to throw him off a balcony and Arthur used to catch him. So, or it was the other way around, I'm not quite sure. But it's a great little scene. From there, Michael is slowly introduced into the life. Tommy insists on showing him about the realms, and John also insists on letting Polly allow Michael to actually experience what the Peaky Blinders do. Michael seems adamant and ambitious to join the gang and learn their way of life. His real first taste of this experience is when they actually go to a horse auction, where Tommy is wanting to buy a horse. It's also the same one where he meets May Carlton. However, Michael comes along to see what it's like, and it ends on a quite eventful note where he actually gets physically where Tommy actually is nearly attempted to be assassinated by one of Savini's men, his second in command, and then Arthur violently bashes him. Michael sees this violence and almost assassination on Tommy, and gets a true understanding of what the life entails in that exact moment. Furthermore, there's actually a funny scene on the way to the horse auction, where Polly makes Michael sandwiches, and then Michael says, "Let's have some lunch," while they're on the back of a truck on the way to the auction. And Arthur and John and all the people have a go at him because he's brought like a packed lunch to the gang activity. It's a great scene, and I'll play a clip of it now if I can remember. Now, at the end of Season 2, along with sharing some other great scenes, obviously, is Michael's 18th birthday in the garrison and his scene with Isaiah in the pub. He also says a great ending scene with Tommy where he shows his true ambition and actually explains to Tommy that he wants to make real money. That's Michael's story basically in Season 2. In Season 3, he is definitely more mature and he is definitely more based now and confident within the gang's activities, although being the complete legitimate side of the business. He's almost really like a second Tommy. He really is pushing for legitimacy with Tommy, and it is quite good to see, really. I quite liked Michael in Season 3. He had some good potential. Furthermore, this is almost when his hostility arises with the family. There's some multiple scenes, specifically after Grace dies, in which Tommy speaks to Michael first because he's dealing with legitimate business, which is the most important aspect of Tommy's business now. And John and Arthur get very upset that Michael saw Tommy before them. This leads to a scene in the kitchen where Arthur gets quite upset and he has a bit of a confrontation with Michael. And furthermore, in the same episode towards the end, Michael actually is pissed with John and Arthur, that meaning being on the drink, and they're actually shooting bottles, and Michael holds the gun up to Arthur's head. And then he holds up to John's head. And you can see John is physically a bit nervous because the gun, it's a Webley revolver and the hammer jumps sometimes, which means that it can pre-fire and they can basically just kill them. So, yeah, Michael was definitely a bit hostile here in this situation. Furthermore, throughout the season, we know that the main villain, Father Hughes, actually molested Michael as a kid, or it's very heavily insinuated. With this molestation, Michael is obviously very upset and angry, and he really begs Tommy to have the final kill on Father Hughes. Polly, however, is very against this. Not that it matters, because in the end, he still ends up killing Father Hughes and getting his revenge for what Hughes had done to Michael as a child, which is great. And it is a line that Michael crosses that he can't necessarily go back from, as it is his second time killing someone, not his first, because if you remember, a lot of people think this is his first time he's ever killed anyone. He actually shoots one of Alfie's men in the head in the confrontation scene between Tommy and Alfie, the cross the line scene, if you remember. Then, in season 3, that is more or less all he does. He really is into the gang and understands what needs to be done, as Tommy says in his final speech when he's handing out the money. From there, he obviously gets arrested, as do all the other members of the Peaky Blinders. And we're on to season 4. At the start of season 4, Michael looks visibly shocked that he's about to be killed. And they obviously all get saved, and we skip to a few years later after that hanging. We see now Michael is more or less the second in command for the Shelby Company Limited, working very closely with Tommy, being really the only member of the previous Peaky Blinders gang in season 3, who still happily keeps communications and works with Tommy, besides Ada obviously as well. But Michael is shown to be very smart with numbers and running the business quite well with Tommy. He's also on cocaine now, which isn't great, but he explains how the nights are long and he needs energy to push through it. So, more or less in season 4, Michael is the second in command and very smart. He could even be a real second Tommy, or challenge Tommy for intelligence within the company. Tommy obviously still being smarter, but Michael is definitely holding his own in the company. Then in the end of season 1, at the end of episode 1, he actually gets shot, which is fantastic. So he's really out of commission for the whole season. But he has some great scenes where he reunites with his orphan mother and some other great scenes with Polly, and essentially he ends up betraying Tommy to save his mother's life, as Polly and Tommy organize a plan to outsmart Luca and essentially send him into a ambush. However, Michael is unaware of this completely, and he just believes he's saving his mother, which is essentially what he was doing. Tommy does ask him, however, if there was anything else he should know, because Tommy was still going to go to the ambush nonetheless, and Michael chose not to tell him. This I don't see as a real bad thing, as by Michael not telling Tommy he was going into an ambush, thus in his mind he was saving his mother over Tommy, which is a completely reasonable thing to do. Although Tommy and Michael are still family to an extent, it's like saving your boss over your mother. Who would you choose? So, with Michael choosing to save his mother over Tommy and not warn him at all about the ambush, even though it was Tommy and Polly's plan from the get-go, Tommy, in the end, in episode 6, exiles Michael to America. And this, I believe Michael took quite harsh. It's not exactly a bad exile, it is just a way for the Shelby Company Limited to establish operations in America, but it is also at the same time an exile because Michael did betray Tommy in his eyes, and he sees him for another goal now, which is America. Michael's still definitely building the Shelby Empire and helping Tommy out immeasurably. Perhaps Tommy could have even had a difficult decision if he really wanted to send Michael, but this way just kind of solidified it and moved the process along. So now with Michael in America and the Italians dealt with, we're on to season 5, episode 1, in which we see Michael has foolishly not listened to Tommy. So one quick thing I want to say here too now is that Michael's hostilities probably weren't really that strong against Tommy. There was probably some dislike after he was exiled, but they were still in constant communication because they were running the business together. Now, Michael could have definitely just looked at this as a pure business relationship and nothing else, which is arguably what he may have done, and the more he mixed with the criminals in America, and of course meeting his wife at the club in Detroit called the Gladiator, as Mosley says in season 5, episode 3. This is where Michael met Gina, and obviously he was mixing with different Americans, and that ultimately leading to him not listening to Tommy to pull out from the stock market. So he took other people's advices over Tommy, his boss, and this cost the company a heap of money in season 5 when they lost all their stocks in the share market. Although they had retained cash, so they weren't completely fucked. But with Michael meeting Gina, this essentially was the beginning of the end. Gina's uncle was Jack Nelson, one of the biggest crime bosses in New York and in America in general, specifically Boston. even having reaches to the presidents, as we learn in season 6. However, Gina definitely would have corrupted Michael and started putting ideas in his head as to why is Tommy still the leader, you're smarter, you should betray Tommy and become the leader, you should become the leader of the Peaky Blinders, etc. She was definitely feeding him information that Tommy wouldn't have wanted and Michael liked, because he always thought that after his exile he perhaps was being put down and just sort of left to the background, as opposed to his previous roles where he was actually on the road and he could have taken over Tommy's business one day. But like I said, to the exile, choosing his mother over his boss, it's just an unfortunate situation. Anyway, we get to season 5 where Michael comes back to the England with Gina. And from the get-go, it's all completely messy. Now, this is actually something I am going to make a video on, but on the way back to England, Michael actually gets caught by the IRA members, and the IRA woman, Laura McKee, one of the main villains in season 6, actually tells Tommy that Michael was talking to people who wanted to betray Tommy. Now, this is going to be a whole nother video, but this could specifically be Michael actually being a traitor from then on and not developing through season 5. And Laura McKee could have actually been telling the truth. It's going to be something we dive into, but all you need to know for this video is that Michael is specifically caught by Laura McKee apparently talking and planning to betray Tommy. Tommy kind of believes this, kind of doesn't. Anyway, Michael makes it back to the garrison. They have a very hostile meeting where Tommy more or less curses his child if Michael is lying. And Michael instantly just has this pure hostility towards Tommy and very massive lack of respect. As Arthur even says to him, like, what the fuck do you think you're doing, when he tries to run at Tommy after Tommy insults him. Furthermore, throughout the rest of the season, Michael just really gets bossed around and bullied by the Peaky Blinders and Tommy and Arthur in specific. It's not a great environment for Michael, and his anger is just brewing up from this point. And now we come to the part where he actually chooses to betray Tommy. Now, he betrays Tommy purely out of his own ambition to take over the Peaky Blinders and deal with the Americans, as they believe Tommy's gang is a more or less $2 gang, a street gang that has no interest and no professional capability. So Michael advises that he takes over the gang, but he does this at the family meeting in season 5, episode 6, where the whole family is there, and he does it very abruptly. So Michael does that. He proposes his plan to Tommy, saying that he's the new generation and Finn can come along and they can start anew, and Tommy can be a dead man, basically assumed as a dead man, and Michael can take over everything, blah blah blah, setting out his ambitions and his plan, to which Tommy, understandably, completely refuses, throwing into a fire and saying that Michael is no longer a part of the family and that he does not want Michael back when he returns from getting Barney outside of that same meeting. Michael understands now that he is completely out of the family, and he really isn't that upset by it, because Gina and him, he believes that the Americans he can work with and completely overthrow the Peaky Blinders. And like I said, his reasons for this were the previous exile and his almost marginalization from the Peaky Blinders on behalf of Tommy. So his admiration now to work with the Americans is arguably understandable, as he feels like the Peaky Blinders betrayed him, so now he's all more or less just doing what was done to him. Then we come to season 6, where the whole season Michael is really more or less just actively working against Tommy. In season 5 he was already going to go to plan B, which was arguably going with the Americans, but with Polly's unfortunate death due to the obvious passing in real life from Helen McCrory, rest in peace, Michael swore to Tommy that he's going to take revenge. So yeah, essentially in season 6, after Michael works with the Americans to try and betray Tommy and eventually kill him, he is ultimately shot in the head by Tommy in the final episode, as he is once again and finally outsmarted by Tommy. Michael was always potentially the second smartest in the Peaky Blinders, although he unfortunately was too ambitious and almost too arrogant in his pursuit against Tommy, ultimately leading to him being kind of a joke, as the Americans share scenes with him where they almost mock him, even having a go at him in the final episode, saying that it was a shame that he didn't have the guts to kill Tommy and look him in the eyes and do it. So, yeah, those are the main reasons why Michael essentially betrayed Tommy. It was due to his exile and growing ambitions and his gathered anger and hatred towards Tommy. In the end, it wasn't enough really, and Michael's ambition was too good for his own sake, in the end leading to him dying. But yeah, that's really it. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And yeah, without further ado, I hope you have a great day or night, wherever you are.